Hi, I'm Brad. And finally, I found some copium tanks that fell off a truck, and I'm here to deliver them all to you. So it's been a considerable amount of time since I was able to make a video on a big SteamVR data mine or anything related to Valve's upcoming hardware projects. However, last week, finally we got a big one. A really big one. With some sort of clarifications and final features we can expect from Valve's next headset, whatever they may finally call it. Now, before I start doing my whole presentation, I do want to say that the cool thing about this video was, other than the recording, this video was entirely done in VR. Pre-produced, keynote setup, editing, all done while I'm wearing a headset and sitting in VR chat, which is kind of a wild thing to think about and might be viable in the near future. We'll see. So this is the SteamVR Beta 1.26 Datamine video, but there's actually more going on here than just SteamVR itself, which is, I'll probably speak on that a lot more later because it's pretty notable. And my tagline is, our eyes are finally being opened, which is a teaser to some bigger stuff later on in the video relating to Valve's next hardware project. But I do want to ease into the stuff with some little things that are still very important and kind of paint a clearer picture of what's going on in the back end and front end. Now, disclaimer, anything I do say is basically an interpretation, and all interpretations are basically speculation. But everything in this sort of presentation I have here are real strings. You can come to your own interpretations, your own speculations. The difference between me and you is I kind of spend way too much time doing this, and I can connect things probably a little bit easier, but still, yeah, let's just get that out of the way. So let's start with the front end. Some very obvious stuff that was announced in the actual Steam news for the new SteamVR beta. And one is better bindings, and one is called what I like to call better handling. So the first thing they added to the front hand was what they call a handle, has been added to the dashboard, which allows the users to move it anywhere in their VR space, whether it's in the ceiling, to your left, right, down. So you don't have to press the button over and over to kind of move it around, and it's useful. Nothing new if you've seen anything from the Quest UI. It's pretty much the same exact thing, but built for SteamVR, and it works with whatever overlay wants to support it later on. Now, they added an automatic rebinding for controllers without native bindings. This works for both SteamVR input and OpenXR input as well. For games, basically, if they cannot find any sort of native controller binding in an application, they'll be able to automatically switch to it. And it's kind of weird because about a year ago, it's from this video actually, they were adding a bunch of different systems for input, which they call compatibility mode. And while a lot of these strings did kind of carry over to it, they shipped this sort of compatibility mode 8 months ago, and now they basically deprecated it already. So Valve is working really fast and hard and just kind of throwing things out the window, see what sticks, and improving things. But the new automatic rebinding is a lot better than the other system because no one else used the other system. It mostly seemed to relate to the application providing remappings rather than the actual hardware drivers. So this allows either third-party manufacturers or even Valve themselves to just put a remapping file into whatever controller is being used to basically emulate any other controller configuration or any other inputs and layers and stuff. It's a pretty nice feature. I haven't seen it working in action yet, but it definitely looks way better based on all the examples that they've given in the actual files themselves. Now we're going to start moving on to the backend stuff, the stuff that Valve has not actually announced that they're working on, or like stuff that is being praised to the rooftops or whatever. And the first thing is pretty interesting. It's what they call a SteamVR voice chat or a SteamVR web RTC chat. And this is brand new. I know people bring up the old big picture mode, can pull up an old chat window and do stuff, but that's as well completely deprecated. And what's interesting about all these strings is while they're in SteamVR, they also made some big updates to the actual Steam client beta. So basically, when you open Steam without SteamVR, they are setting up for the system to be cross-compatible between VR and non-VR. They have a bunch of VR toggles, which will kind of look like this on the left here. You can see already in the friends list, you'll have a group chats toggle. Well, it seems like Valve is going to have also a VR chats toggle to do some of the similar stuff, to do more cross-compatibility, cross-chatting between VR and non-VR users. So it's pretty interesting. They also added new icons for this system built into the files, and this seems to allow users to go into an incognito mode where they don't want to be bothered by people or they don't want to support this VR chat feature. It just toggles whatever's going on. The icon is actually being taken from the new UI in the Steam Big Picture mode, the Steam Deck UI. However, that icon on the right, where they just basically turn off that mode, that is brand new and completely made for this incognito mode. Now, I did a lot of tweaks to the UI using CSS and kind of rebuilding it to kind of match more like the Steam Deck UI, even though a lot of that work is being done already. But yeah, it does seem like there'll just be a button that you'll be able to press to toggle in and out of that system. So speaking of new UI, even though that previous image is mostly a mock-up of some edits, they are working extremely hard right now in changing the UI to support or more closely reflect the UI of the Steam Deck. This is a brand new file of a new web interface that can be shared between the web UI and the VR UI, and it's completely talking about the footer, as you can see those VR feet for some reason. And the footer is actually exactly the same as the footer that is in the Steam Deck UI, that big black bar with completely white icons. Seems like they're going to be taking that and kind of reproducing it for VR, which pretty much matches with everything else we've been seeing as well. Like, I mean, you can see here the entire settings menu completely matches with the Steam Deck UI in terms of like the exact order that things are in, especially general, system, internet goes exactly 1-to-1. But another new thing added in this update is in the Valve internal menu, which is, you have to activate some strings to get access to. Valve is currently allowing internal employees to choose which UI SteamVR boots into, and these are brand new options. 10 foot, Steam 10 foot is the old big picture mode, and the joke is they don't want to touch it with the 10-foot pole. I don't know if that's really why they call it that. But the brand new Steam Deck UI is actually referred to as Gamepad UI. And while I can set the SteamVR to launch into Gamepad UI, it doesn't actually work. It's still a work in progress, and Valve's internal build of SteamVR probably work, but the SteamVR beta or any public things, I can't boot into it yet. Even though when I do set this setting, I can kind of interact, or you do see things interacting with the big picture mode if you launch it from desktop. So things are happening on that sort of level. Another proof of this is not only in the SteamVR client strings, but also on March 28th, one day before the SteamVR beta came out, another Steam client beta came out that literally talks about serving either the 10-foot overlay or the new big picture mode overlay entirely to VR users. It's interesting because they talk about it as if it's an overlay and not like a completely built-in dashboard, which we'll have to talk about later on. It seems like Valve is focusing heavily on overlays for SteamVR, and it makes a lot of sense. I made a whole video talking about the power of doing AR through VR with Steam overlays. It's a very powerful system that has been touched on a little bit, but really can be magical if you have some powerful PC stuff going on there. They have some new localization files that talk about brand new menus, such as the Steam menu, which might actually pull up that overlay. That maybe it'll pull up the big picture mode, the new one, or whatever. But they also have a new reference to a quick access menu, which does not exist. I couldn't find any other strings related to this new quick access menu. So I wonder if they're going to be able to pop up a smaller menu before you just completely go into the entire dashboard itself for ease of use, or activating or deactivating simple stuff such as that incognito mode or other things. So I edited the files again to kind of reflect what that might look like. Maybe just a Steam button will pull up a Steam menu. Another new thing related to sort of this idea of having a headset that can actually do room setup by itself. They actually added a new button, or I should say they kind of added a temporary button to the UI. You can activate this with some string tweaks, but this is brand new. You can see on the top right. It doesn't do anything yet. You click it, it just kind of disables the dashboard, and it's expecting a new room setup feature that just does not work yet. So eventually, whenever they release their new headset, clearly it's going to allow you to do a room setup entirely in the headset without actually going to your PC and doing the old 2016 version where you have to look at your freaking. It's really bad, honestly. Like, you have to go around your room and mark things. It's very rudimentary in these days. Now I want to go back to January 2021 SteamVR beta update. Pretty much the first time that Deckard was added to the files, and we made a big deal about it and all that stuff. One of the big things that were added to the files during then, and later removed, was a new folder which had a driver for what they called VRLink. And the driver was basically a tweaked version of a 2017 Realtek device driver, which is like a Wi-Fi device, so you can connect wirelessly to something. And of course, later on, they would add an entire menu that you can't do anything with. And this menu was again for connecting Wi-Fi devices and letting your PC create a Wi-Fi hotspot for that functionality. The interesting thing about this is the system menu and internet menus both rely on a set of drivers that we don't have access to. It's all internal Valve drivers, and it used to be called driver underscore CVHMD. Eventually, it was changed to driver underscore HMD. And that's very important because the next feature is very big I'm going to talk about. Every time I've seen a more recent patent, everything after index, every single patent would make sure to notify that their headset or a headset that they might be working on or any prototypes would have an eye tracking module. Every single patent looked like this. Again, I'm highlighting it with the arrow. And while patents don't mean products, I would also get some weird murmurs, which I don't really like hearing sort of people tell me, oh, I saw a VR Valve employee in VR chat with eye tracking or whatever, or I heard that a headset will have eye tracking. I usually don't listen to those things. I wait for stuff like this. And this is the first huge dump of information in the SteamVR files that show Valve is implementing an eye tracking system for their next headset. Now, when I first published this on Twitter, I didn't really give any details on why this means it's Valve implementing it for their headset. But when you go back to that old, that's sort of what do you call it, driver underscore HMD, you can see here that the entirety of this eye tracking system relies on those drivers that also is being built for those features that work for their other headset as well, like the system settings and the internet settings UI and everything. So this is being built for Valve's headset. Not only that, we also have proof that it is for a Valve headset because they added a lot of these eye tracking strings to the Lighthouse binaries. And whenever something is added to a Lighthouse binary, that usually means that Valve is touching it or using it for their own hardware in some way. Every single Valve headset uses the Lighthouse binaries in some way. Even if they don't even use the Lighthouse tracking system, which is probably what gets a little confusing for people. But it's very cool because they're going to have a whole eye tracking server, which will be able to connect to and be able to communicate eye tracking data to applications. And it seems to be also based on OpenXR, which will allow more compatibility with more apps and make things a lot easier. They even have the actual eye tracking calibration and a whole settings menu that we couldn't get working to activate to see what it looks like, but all of these things are finally there in the SteamVR beta files in the back end, and it's probably one of the most exciting things we saw in a while related to feature sets. Now, again, as I said, some people were kind of confused. Maybe they were building this eye tracking stuff for other headsets. I heard people thinking it might be for PSVR 2. I don't know. But I also heard people saying, oh, maybe Valve's doing something for Quest Pro, which also has eye tracking. You can plug into a PC. And now I get it. But if we didn't have those driver underscore HMDs and like all this server stuff, I would say, yeah, that makes sense. But also, the way that the Quest Pro, for example, initializes into eye tracking for PC, they use their own OpenXR thing. They have their own built-in server and like eye tracking calibration on the standalone headset. So they don't need to do that. All they need to do is provide the OpenXR data to the PC. And Valve actually has also enabled those features, or I should say re-enabled. This was enabled like last month or 2 months ago, but they had to remove it due to some bugs, but they re-enabled it. And it literally allows you to activate different layers for different OpenXR API features. And the most popular one I want to highlight is the OpenXR Toolkit, which literally allows you to plug in a Pimax Crystal or a Vario Aero or a Quest Pro, and it'll automatically just get all the OpenXR data and send that to an application that supports eye tracking. So Valve doesn't need to build out all this eye tracking data in a whole system menu that we can't activate yet, just for other headsets. They might be able to allow other third parties who want to make PCVR hardware with eye tracking, they might be able to tap into that later on. But I just want to really reiterate that the eye tracking stuff, everything that points to the eye tracking within the files, point to it being something that Valve is working on for their own hardware right now. Now, I wanted to highlight another OpenXR API layer that's made by a community member named Rectus. I made a whole video about it where I was able to get the index to do actual OpenXR pass-through, like do tilt brush through, AR pass-through. And Valve is working on pass-through for their next headset as well in some interesting ways. So I'm going to bring up this idea. Now you're thinking with portals, and it's really fitting because Valve has a new feature set also added into the files, which are called portals, or that's pretty much it. Pass-through portals or portal manager. Everything to do with either pass-through AR or actual just popping stuff in your VR space in certain ways. I mean, you can see all these strings. You can toggle pass-through and portals. You can manage your different portals. You can add, remove portals, a lot of different things that they're all calling portals. And the interesting thing is they have a bunch of shapes as well, a bunch of mesh shapes that they added into the files for this backend feature. And you can see all of them here. They have a cube, a cylinder, a what they call a disc, a square, and a sphere. So you can have a lot of different sort of shapes and different pass-through things to mark out different zones in your real life view. But it's also likely that they're going to do a lot of like AR through VR stuff as well, because this reminds me of a patent that was filed in 2020, finalized in 2021, about an idea to actually allow AR components to be overlaid into games. And not only that, Valve gave some sort of interesting information about having sort of a community workshop where people can create different AR layers and stuff and be built into games as well, whether it be a VR game or non-VR game, and sort of do a lot of cross compatibility with those features as long as they give the instructions and the feature sets for these sort of things. So a lot of this stuff from the patent is very eerily similar to this sort of portals feature in almost every way. So again, I think that while it will do a lot of pass-through stuff, like you mark out keyboard and stuff or whatever things you want in your room, I do think we'll also see a lot of cool like community-made AR features, even if it's all digital for different games. And on March 28th, again, the same update with the gamepad UI overlays, Steam beta client also added a new string that allows Steam to make these VR overlays on the fly, which is a brand new feature. And it was also added to SteamVR beta the day after that Steam client. A new feature in Valve Internal, which will allow you to turn on this feature from SteamVR. So again, the idea that there might be some sort of Steam workshop to build overlays or AR things and just pop them in, allow Steam to create them on the fly and remove them. That seems to be something that's happening right now and being tested internally within Valve. I'm very interested to see what kind of features they will launch with or what examples they'll give when we get closer to that day. So final reiteration as my face gets red for my screen. 3 Deckard supported features I'm pretty confident at a very high confidence rating to say that it will have is 1, wireless support of some way, 2, eye tracking, and 3, AR features, whether it be AR through VR or even pass-through features. That seems to be all very high confidence likely to be happening for their next headset. Now, that's pretty much everything I have to really show off related to Steam and SteamVR. But there's one more area that Valve is also working really hard. Like almost every other day, I see a new update for this thing, and a lot of it relates to some of the VR stuff they're doing as well. So Steam Client, SteamVR, and GamesCOPE, which is the compositor that Valve uses for Linux on the Steam Deck. It's very likely that they're building features out for whatever they're doing for VR as well. And we had a big update, a new branch being created last week for GamesCOPE that is enabling a new type of DRM leasing support. And this isn't the DRM like like DRM on like a movie where you can't watch it or you can't record it. DRM stands for Direct Render Manager. It's something that Valve has been working on for Linux for more than like almost like 6 years now or something like that. And it just allows that direct mode, allow low latency connection between all the DRM managers and masters inside Linux, and connect directly to a head-mounted display, so it doesn't have to do the old windowing mode basically that VR used to run a long time ago. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in this new branch because they talk about some of the features that they're sort of trying to make sure this DRM leasing supports. And the one big feature is HDR, which is not surprising. We've had a ton of HDR 10-bit strings added to SteamVR even. But a more interesting one is they're also trying to seemingly make sure that this DRM leasing also supports adaptive sync, which is, if you ever heard of adaptive sync, it's also known as virtual variable refresh rate, or an NVIDIA G-Sync or AMD FreeSync. The idea that you can have a range of different refresh rates rather than just one static one. And that's important because Valve patented a way to make sure that this can happen for a VR device a few years ago as well. And we're starting to see strings in SteamVR. You can especially see it down on the middle here, where that is supported. So things are just kind of all meshing together very well, whether it be patents, Steam client betas, SteamVR betas, GamesCOPE betas. All these different things are really coming together. So I do want to remind people, as always, Valve time is at play. We can never guess when this HMD will be announced or released. When anyone asks me, I'm not gonna answer anything because I don't know. I can just only provide all these strings and all these features that they're working on the back end, and you gotta decide for yourself whether you want to wait an indefinite amount of time. But I do want to note that there's just been so much cooperation right now from the GamesCOPE stuff, the Steam stuff, SteamVR stuff. It feels very interesting of how many different things are all working together at once to build out these SteamVR features. This hasn't happened for a while, so it's made me kind of like excited. It's actually, this video was exhausting to make because I always was scared that once I made this video, another new update would come out, whether to Steam Beta or GamesCOPE, that I would want to cover, and I would miss it because I don't want to make these videos very often. So either way, it's exciting times, and it's interesting to see all these different teams that Valve aligned for this one goal of whenever they're going to launch a product. But that's it. I want to thank all my mega patrons, bradsmells.com/Patreon. All these names here, they donate a considerable amount of money per month to have their names listed here, and allows me to do this. These are always my most favorite videos, like genuinely. So thank you for everyone who lets me do this, and all the community members that also love to help for my data mining. It's always very fun times when we have big updates like this. But that's pretty much all I got for now. Hopefully we'll get more stuff soon. It really does feel fast right now, but we'll see. Bye.